Hi guys, welcome to the guide. Today we're going to be talking about the Bell P-39 Airacobra. It was a revolutionary design for its time. It first flew on April 6, 1938. And the entire design of the plane based around a 37mm cannon that shot directly out of the propeller of it. So to make room for this giant behemoth of a cannon, the designers at Bell put the engine in the middle of the fuselage right behind the pilot so they could stick this giant behemoth of a cannon up in the nose of the plane. And there was a 9-foot long crankshaft that ran from the engine to and spun the propeller, and this crankshaft ran right between the pilot's legs. So imagine that thing just right between your legs spinning around at like 10,000 RPM while you're up at like 10,000 feet. That could make for a very bad day. Alright, so for the general specs, it had a wingspan of 34 feet and a length of 30 feet. The production models, which were neutered from the original prototype, didn't have a supercharger, so they were not nearly as fast as they could have been, and they only went 335 miles per hour at 14,000 feet. They were powered by an Allison V12 liquid-cooled engine that produced 1,150 horsepower. That was not supercharged. The production aircraft was not supercharged, and it neutered the performance of this plane severely. It had a range of only 600 miles, and it was armed, as I've said previously, with one 37mm cannon and 4 machine guns. In some of those models, it was a 20mm cannon and 4 machine guns. And sometimes the machine guns were 30 calibers, and sometimes the machine guns were 50 calibers, just depending on the model. As the war progressed, they just kind of threw away the 30 caliber machine guns and just stuck with the 50 caliber machine guns. And it also had room for 500 pounds worth of bombs. Alright, so that's the random gibberish specs out of the way. It was originally designed as an interceptor, so to take down bombers. And I'm gonna be honest, in this game I kind of suck with this plane, and that's about the best luck I have with this plane, is taking down like bomber type aircraft. And even then I just get kill assist. I don't even get kills though. Yeah! This plane is hard to fly with. I'm not good with it. I'm just gonna be straight up. I am not good with this plane. But with the supercharger in it, it could reach a speed of 390 miles per hour. The first prototype that they made. So, like, for its time, it hauled ass. But it was also in competition with the P-51 Mustang for that supercharger. And obviously, it lost that fight. So that's why when it went into production, it didn't come with a supercharger, because they chose to give those superchargers to the Mustang instead of the Airacobra, which completely and totally neutered the performance of the Airacobra. But the Mustang became legendary because of it. It's just one of those interesting points in history where today we could be sitting here and praising the P-39 Airacobra for how awesome of a plane it was instead of the Mustang, if it got the supercharger instead of the Mustang. So, I don't know, that's just a little side note. Stuff like that interests me for some reason. But it did make its way over to Europe, and the British did not like it. Because it didn't have a supercharger at altitude, it just couldn't perform. And it couldn't perform the way the British wanted it to against the Germans. So, British did not like it. Americans did not like it. It was pretty much proved not to be worthy of the European theater by the Americans and the British. So, as with everything, we sent it over to the Pacific and gave a lot of them to the Soviet Union, which the Soviet Union actually loved this plane, because apparently all their dogfights and fights in general were at low altitudes and not at high altitudes, unlike us. because they didn't have high altitude bombing issues like we did, and I think that was one of the main issues of it. So yeah, out of the 9,588 built, 4,773 were sent to Russia. The Russians called them the Little Cobras because, you know, everybody's got to put their spin on things. And they thoroughly loved them. And originally, before I was doing this, I thought they used it as a ground support airplane because it has a giant cannon in it. But no, apparently they used it as an air superiority fighter because most of their dogfights took place at lower altitudes where the lack of a supercharger wasn't as big of an issue. And they just loved the fact that it had a 37mm cannon on the thing. Like, that's like an 1.5 inch in diameter bullet flying at you. Like, that is a giant bullet coming your way. It could only hold like 30 of the bullets at a time, but still, that is a giant bullet. So, it excelled in particular at just like taking out bombers, or the German medium bombers. It was great at that, because, I mean, it's got a big giant cannon on the thing. And 5 out of the top 10 Soviet aces during the war got most of their kills in a P-39. Most of them, not all of them, because as the war progressed, the Soviets got better fighters of their own, and I'm sure they replaced them. But as far as the Lend-Lease Act went, this was the Soviets' favorite plane that came from America. In the Pacific, the United States used them, and they did not do very good. That's where most of the U.S. sent their planes once they figured out they weren't going to be able to tango with the Germans in Europe. They sent them to the Pacific, and they were lucky to get a 1-to-1 kill ratio with the Japanese counterparts. Just, they couldn't keep up. They weren't. I think it was partially just pilots training at the beginning of the Pacific War, and partially it just didn't turn out to be as good of a plane as it was supposed to because it didn't come with a supercharger. Like that was kind of its Achilles heel. There's just no supercharger, and it was designed to have a supercharger. And a lot of early World War II American planes just didn't come with a supercharger. Like, something in the design process of America, or in like the generals of the Army, Air Corps, or Navy, were just like, what's the point of the supercharger? Why do we need a supercharger? And it took them a while to figure it out. But yeah, so in conclusion, it was a really advanced plane for its time. It just kind of got neutered because it didn't have a supercharger like it was supposed to. And it did live on after the war as a racer, back in the day when people were still interested in watching airplanes race each other. They ended up sticking a more powerful engine in it that had a supercharger, and it proved to be a very successful racer, beating out some P-51 Mustangs and taking first place in more than one race. Yeah, that's about the sum of the story. Alright, thanks for watching.